record. It's just along the bottom. Participants,
there you go.
share screen,
Oh, there we go.
record.
Got it going now. Perfect. Thank you.
Julie,
Right.
will you do a screen share when Joe's wants to do her PowerPoint?
I'm sure that Joe will have that well in hand, and I've now enabled everybody to share their screen when it's their turn.
Lovely. Great, thank you.
Great. Kia ora, Trindy. Thanks for joining us on a Friday night.
Kia ora. I don't know if I'll be able to stay for the whole 2 hours because I'm not long been home from work, but I'll give it a go.
Thank you. Thank you for being
Welcome.
here. And kia ora to everybody else who I haven't managed to say hi to yet. It's really wonderful that you're here. We've got just under 30 people at the moment. And if past experience is anything to go by, there'll be more in another 10 minutes or so. So I thought I would just kick us off with a karakia, unless there's anybody here who would like to do it on our behalf. No, if not, then I'll share with you one of my favourite Rumi poems. Short and sweet and wonderful. In this earth, in this soil, in this pure field, let's not plant any seed other than seeds of compassion and love.
Beautiful.
That's one that seems to fit very nicely with the theme of our two subgroups that we're here to feed into today. That's our Peace, Conflict and Reconciliation group and our Social Justice group, both of whom are thinking a lot, I'm sure, about the concepts of compassion and love in the context of climate change and our climate change response. And without much more ado than that, I'm shortly about to hand over to Kendra to share the social justice group's work, and before that to Jace as the facilitator of that group. But before I do, I just want to share with you that I sometimes feel a bit sad that I don't get to join the check-ins at the breakout rooms. So I want to do a very quick check-in, and while I don't want to go around 30 people and use up lots and lots of time, I thought it might be nice to share a little movement that expresses how you're feeling right now. So 2 seconds that says how you're feeling in movement, just so that I get to share a check-in, if that's okay with you all. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, that was wonderful. Okay, over to you, Jace, please, to introduce your group's mahi, and then on to Kendra.
Oh, kia ora, everybody. So
Oh,
I'm not sure if you're
sorry, Jace, I've made a big mistake.
Yeah, I was just about.
I almost forgot our wonderful
What's
star
that?
group. How could I possibly do that? So
All
sorry,
right.
Jace. Press
Okay.
pause.
No worries.
And we'll hand over for a presentation on the concepts of a regenerative and distributive economy.
Thank you.
And thank you.
No worries. So we'll just organize screen sharing here and get going with it. While can you hear me while we're organizing screen sharing? Yeah, okay. So this talk comes from a few decades of learning by Jack, my husband, and later on by me. And in the last few weeks, some very lively discussions between us. And we're thinking that of you who are listening, you may tend towards one or other of two orientations to this topic. On the one hand, you may think it's high time we got our minds around this idea of a regenerative distributive economy, and that without this, we won't be able to achieve a stable climate. On the other hand, you may be thinking, come on guys, this is a climate emergency. We haven't got time to make a nicer society while we're fighting the flames. So we hope that we have something here for each perspective, and that this will weave them together a bit. Let's first acknowledge that what brings us together in this hui is our conviction that we must weave our communities together to work to stabilize the climate and adapt to the impacts of climate change, and that we are right now in an emergency. So in this talk, we hope to show you that underlying climate change is an economy with a goal that drives us to overshoot planetary boundaries, especially climate stability, and that fundamental to drawing back from boundary overshoot is the necessity of a more equal society. And if this is true, then concern about this must be part of our urgent climate work. So now let's lay our foundations carefully. What's an economy? An economy is the means we use and the choices we make when we take natural resources and then convert, distribute, trade, and consume them to provide for the needs of ourselves and others. And then we dispose of the residue or use it as feedstock for other resource conversions. And then we might ask, what's an economy for? And what should be the goal of an economy? And the central point of this presentation is the contention that an economy is for the well-being of all the people within the sustainable limits of this planet. Okay, then, what's well-being? After 70 years of focus on financial well-being only, at last the idea that there are several domains of well-being is finally taking hold. So not only financial well-being and the stuff that we've made and built, which is there depicted as built capital, but also human, social, cultural, and knowledge assets, sometimes referred to as here as capitals, and the natural environment contribute to human well-being. So this slide is a version of that. There are many versions of this, and I want to show you also the version that our own New Zealand Treasury Department uses, which is a simpler but serviceable version. It divides it into 4 capitals: natural, social, human, and financial. So then we might ask, what's the goal of our present economy, both globally and in New Zealand? Well, if we listen to the business broadcasts on our daily media, we'll hear about profits, quarterly growth, gross domestic product or GDP, which lets us know what our economy is driving at. So GDP is the monetary value of all goods and services produced within an area, New Zealand say, within a time frame, say a year or a quarter. It's assumed that the more goods and services, the better, no matter what they are. And you readily see that there's a problem with this, because the things in this slide contribute to GDP, contribute positively to GDP. That is pollution, management of crime and disaster, militarism and war, all grow the GDP. So important for us is that there's a close correlation between increasing GDP and increasing emissions. The two track very closely in their data. That's not the only problem. There's another problem. That GDP is often used to measure the well-being or the welfare of a population, although its inventor, Simon Kuznets, warned against this use, saying it couldn't be used to measure citizen well-being. And there are many contributors to well-being that are not traded in markets, therefore not measured in GDP, and therefore don't feature as goals in our economy, such as, and note particularly women's work there, family time, social relationships, culture, play. I want to also show you how GDP tracks with a measure of actual well-being. Next slide. These are admittedly US data, and the blue line is the GDP, and the time, in case you can't read it, goes from 1950 to 2010. So over 60 years, the GDP of the US was multiplied 7 times. Now the red dotted line is a measure of well-being. It's a particular measure called the genuine progress indicator, which is one of many. And you will see as GDP soars, tracking emissions, the well-being of people stays flat. Possibly add another decade there, and we might be seeing it go down. So this may be enough to convince you that GDP is not a good measure of well-being, and that growing GDP is not a suitable goal for our economy, and it may in fact be a dangerous one, especially for the climate. Action on climate change has been stalled by insistence that economic growth is the overriding goal, and we need to change that mindset. So the next big thing is, do we need a more equal society to achieve climate stability? Let's look at how a family in the lowest decile, that is the lowest tenth of the population in terms of either income or wealth, might react to aspects of the necessary transition to a low carbon future. First of all, because they're stressed about paying the rent, feeding and clothing their kids, and maybe even housing them, they don't have much time for reading, thinking, or discussing or acting on climate change. And if they hear that we should, for example, cut down on meat consumption to help the climate, they laugh because they can't afford much meat anyway. And they live far away from their places of work, and they have a clapped out, unreliable car to get them there. And when they hear that petrol prices are going up because the emissions trading scheme has put the carbon price up, they feel pretty angry. When this happened in France, they got out onto the streets as the Gilets jaunes, or yellow vests, and protested and rioted until the policy was reversed. Last month, new data appeared on wealth inequality in New Zealand. Data developed from Statistics New Zealand by Max Rashbrook, who's one of New Zealand's most eloquent voices on inequality. And I think that what's here will shock you. On the left-hand side is New Zealand's population divided into segments, and on the right-hand side is New Zealand's wealth. And as you look at this slide, you need to see that the poorest 50% of people in New Zealand have 2% of New Zealand's wealth. The middle 40% have a pretty fair share, 39% of the wealth. The richest 10% have 59% of the wealth. And that kind of blows apart any ideas we have of New Zealand as the country of the fair go. Now, global income distribution is kind of matches that in the next slide. Here we've got quintiles, or 20%, lowest 20% at the bottom, highest 20% at the top. And the red is income, the distribution of income. So the richest 20% of people in the world have over 80% of the world income. And then you look down to the poorest 20% and you see how much red is in their segment. So that's distribution of income. Now, distribution of consumption looks very similar. It's distributed in a very similar way, and distribution of emissions is also maps onto that in a very similar way. So the well-off, and globally, perhaps most of us are among them, consume more than our fair share and emit far more than the poor. Social comparison, inflated by skillful advertising, drives much of our consumption. To be seen as more affluent than our peers, a very questionable value, and one that does not improve our well-being. So a lot of consumption, a lot of emissions do not improve our well-being. What does inequality look like in more detail? It affects access to housing, energy, food, water, healthcare, education, income, work, political voice, gender equality, information, and justice. Weaving our community together to move on climate action is what our forum is about. The weaving together part is hard to do in this economic structure. He waka eke noa, we're all in this together, is where we need to be, but we're not yet. So what's a better goal for our economy? Well, we would start with values, the sort of values that we find in Indigenous societies everywhere, and here particularly in Maori culture. Love and respect for the whole web of life and seeing ourselves as part of it, with responsibility to protect it now and for generations to come. And sharing the wealth that we derive from nature with everyone in society. Whanaungatanga, kaitiakitanga, manakitanga. Our goals then might be the health of our planet, the well-being of our people, and the resilience of our systems. Hey, this sounds like the structure of our forum, doesn't it? So what does this regenerative, redistributive economy sound like? Economist Kate Rayworth is skilled at using arresting images to convey this. She calls this the donut economy. And this is her constructed image of where we are. And you are to notice particularly the ecological ceiling, the outer circle, and the social foundation, the inner circle, and that we are overshooting the ecological ceiling, particularly with climate change, biodiversity loss, land conversion, and nitrogen and phosphorus loading. And we have shortfalls in the social foundation, and the measures that you see there are not accidental. They're based on Sustainable Development Goals globally. And so from there, the idea is we move to there, where we are within the ecological ceiling and above the social foundation for all. And Kate Rayworth calls it a safe, just space for humanity. And action, of course, to get us there, action on the planetary limits is needed. And this already engages everyone who is here in this forum. And particularly the meaning of the term regenerative economy is intended to situate our human activity in nature, living by harvesting what nature continually provides and can continue to provide in the future. This makes the idea of limits important. A future with less energy as we move from fossil fuels to renewables is inevitable. What energy is available will have to be used very carefully to prioritize essential well-being goods and services to ensure community resilience. And it'll have to be distributed more equally. The old story of growing the economy and letting wealth trickle down to the poor never was true, and it's now dangerous. Redistribution is needed and attainable, ensuring that gross inequalities are reduced and eventually eliminated to ensure that everyone's universal needs are met. There is a body of considerable evidence to support the idea that people are happier in a society that protects the natural world, that is more equal, and in which the goal is human well-being in all its dimensions. So, what can we do to move in this direction as citizens of New Zealand and of Nelson Tasman? So we have quite a lot of ideas about what we can do, and I'm going to run through 10 of them, but we'll post more of them on Ning when we post the material of this presentation. And we want to encourage you to post your questions and comments on Ning, and we'll try to monitor the site over the next month to respond to what you say. So let's start with some good news with a kind of action tail. I really want to point out that thinkers in our National Treasury Department have been working for about a decade at least on measuring the right thing in the economy. New Zealand is one of the very few countries in the world that actually does this. As I showed you a few minutes ago, that this is the vision of human well-being towards which our economy is supposed to be directed. And the Treasury Department has worked out a way of measuring this called the Living Standards Dashboard. And the last budget was actually produced by matching it with this stuff. And there's some beginning thought on redistribution, but there needs to be a ton more, and it will come only if we push it. That's our job. We've got to push that ahead. So read and think and talk about this stuff. We'll list references when we post this on Ning, and there are many terms used by various thinkers in this area of inquiry, and these are some of the main ones. I've mentioned donut economy, steady state economy, and ecological economics are important terms in the history of the development of these ideas. And a favorite one for me too, or for us actually, is the economy of enough, a very meaningful term for this area. So question growth when it comes up in conversation or the news media. Try to question at every point, is endless growth possible on a finite planet? Then if you're very interested in this area and want to go a bit deeper, you can join the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, or WeAll, which is working more on this issue. Then something we all can do is reduce material consumption, working with this idea of enough. Enough food, enough clothes, toys, travel. Resisting the siren calls of social comparison and advertising which drive consumption. Resist and reform advertising, for example, by taxing it instead of subsidizing it, which is what we do. Rear kids with different values and an understanding of systems thinking. Reduce energy consumption by driving less, and support local businesses both in converting to renewables and in using less energy more efficiently. And push our councils to reinstate programs to ensure that all homes are well insulated, which benefits energy consumption, emissions, jobs, family income, and health. Run our the way we use natural resources as nature does, in a circular economy, using what would be a waste stream as a new materials conversion stream, and support local businesses who are doing this. Support the idea of just transition, that is, every worker who's displaced from a high emissions job needs support for retraining and maybe income support while that happens. And big one, we need to redistribute wealth. And there are a ton of ways of doing that. such as supporting living wages and minimum incomes, universal access to goods like education and health, physical commons like parks and libraries, intellectual commons, open source information, and very importantly, direct redistribution through wealth tax, capital gains tax, and so on. In making decisions like these economic transitions, we'll benefit from methods of participatory democracy, such as citizens' assemblies. So these are some of the myriad ways that we can restore health to our beautiful planet and well-being to people as we direct ourselves towards a suitable goal for our economy, human well-being for all, living well within planetary boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jo and the STAR team. That was a very comprehensive and fascinating look at something we don't often look at as people concerned about climate change. So many pieces of the puzzle put in there, and I'm going to be watching that recording again. Thank you. If you have a question for the STAR team, please feel free to pop it in the chat, or as they suggested, to put it onto the new Ning website. It really is worth a look, and hopefully we'll be seeing more about that a bit later on. But for now, I will hand back over to Jace, correctly this time, and to the social justice team. Kia ora.
Well, I think I'm speaking for everyone here when we're just talking about how impressed we are with the work that Joanna, Jack, and the STAR team did with presenting that. And of course, it dovetails perfectly well into the social justice concerns that we have been, championing forward with the social justice group. So, from the social justice group, I would like to make a thank you to them and the contributors, which arguably I had a little bit to do with that even as well, because I'm really enjoying being part of that group as well. But so from the social justice group, we originally, as you probably have access to, had gone down a route of making a series of principles that if policy or decision makers applied to their activities, that they would come out with just decisions, ones that engender the kind of things that Jack and Joanna have just illuminated to us. So it's very important, of course, that we have a program to move forward with this, but we also, in social justice, have specific challenges that will come up, such as the sea level rise issue. The rising sea level will not hit everybody equally. It's going to radically affect some people and marginally affect others. And we have to assess as a community how we are going to address this. And there are many ways of doing this. So a group of the social justice, sort of a subgroup from the social justice group, has addressed this, and they've addressed it in a little different way than we had done this in our original work with Tawihi and Colin and Leslie. Remember Leslie? And some other very good activist people. But so from there, we asked Kendra if she would spearhead a 1 month basically session on trying to come up with principles or come up with a method for addressing sea level rise. And so she's done that. And so I'd like to turn it over to Kendra to show what that group has come up with, but knowing that we will be able now to review this. This is a draft. We'll be able to review it. We'll be able to work on it and come up with it as in the larger form to make it our own and a broad consensus document. So Kendra, from there, take it away.
Kia ora, Jace, thank you. And a bit of an overview about the journey that the social justice group has come along. So as he said, I've been involved in it over the last month or 6 weeks. How to introduce this sort of topic? is a biggie, you know, because social justice in of itself, and thank you to the Santa Barbara team for putting this together, because as you were talking, I just want to capture almost what you were saying, because by you being in the introduction here, in a way sets a kind of context for us in a slightly different way than we might have otherwise had, because it put me back straight in mind of the kind of green vision of the planet, the people, and within that is the economy. So we're starting with the micro, and yet it's got so many layers to it, as well as understanding that it fits within this sort of wider context of the planet, and we're in this mix. I had a lovely conversation with Amy yesterday, which was a bit of a sort of warming up to it. And I want to mention a little bit about that as a way of introducing, is that just like you said, that in the economic thing, Joe, is that a lot of the less able financially people are so busy trying to make a living and not just be slaves to rent and mortgage and jobs and all the rest of it, and haven't got time and haven't got energy. And yet, yes, the middle class, the privileged middle classes can act as bridges. And I really like that sense of a concept, and it is an empowering one for us to keep being activists, is that we have the privilege of understanding how the systems, the policies, the money, the distribution and lack of, and a much deeper understanding of all the injustices and oppressions that operate within all these isms, and Amy's team will articulate that well, is that we then can bridge across, because we have day-to-day sometimes contact with those that are less fortunate, and that we can be that bridge builder and advocate. The other piece I want to say is just last night, watching on the project, I just happened to turn it on, and Jane Fonda was there, and she's always been one of my heroes in the activist field. And her quote was, "When you step into activism, you leave behind despair." And I'm truly touched with this sense that so easy we can go into all of the problems and all of the difficulties and all of the challenges, and how is it we stay connected to a sense of possibility. And so, by way of introduction, I wanted to say that to some degree our climate change chapter is to some degree trying to create a sense of an understanding of those problems, but at the same time holding or trying to build some sense of a shared vision of what it could be. So yes, it is to some degree aspirational, but at the same time recognizing that sea level change and sea level rise will create unprecedented conditions, and how is it that we can respond. I think that's enough for the moment. Julie, do you want us to actually go through our chapter as part of the introduction?
No, that's fine. So what you'll be doing within your breakout room is going through it a little bit more, and in each section maybe allowing people to feed their ideas into what you've written so far.
Sure.
Yeah. So no, that's fabulous. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing then? Sure. Is that I was very keen to respect the kind of structure to it, and as a way also of going, there's lots of stuff that the previous sort of iteration of the social justice group had created. There was a lot of material there, and what I'm sensing or hoping is that what we've done is just to some degree distill it, and hopefully we've got the essence of it. And using that discipline of coming down to a word limit is a great way to champion that kind of distillation. So I'm really hoping that we have. So I'll be really looking forward to people's feedback.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, over to Amy with the complementary chapter from the Peace, Conflict and Reconciliation group. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. It's very nice to be here and be part of this work that's been going on for all these months. And just on yeah, what Kendra just said, I'd like to thank the people who I didn't work directly with at the beginning on the first launch day, and yes, the amazing work that went into that document as well. And I too hope that, actually I know we have been able to distill, and there'll be more distillation happening from those documents as well. So yeah, wonderful organisation tonight too, with the how you've linked the groups together. It's been really helpful. So the Peace, Conflict and Reconciliation group, we believe that the environmental crisis results from dysfunctions in society, and that and these are caused by the climate change, these environmental crises. And the dysfunctions in society so the crisis and the dysfunctions in society can't be resolved without also working to end racism, sexism, classism, ageism, and other forms of oppression and inequalities which serve to perpetuate a global economy based on exploitation and greed. And the STAR team has shared that with their work tonight as well. So these oppressions and inequalities confuse and divide people, and recognising how oppressions intersect with the climate emergency can help build a more resilient and wider community action for climate justice. And to start addressing this, we need to acknowledge the importance of self-reflection. The situation is big, it's messy, it's more than what any humans have experienced ever before, and it needs big changes in how we do things, and it will be uncomfortable, and we need to be willing to try and make mistakes and learn from them and try something else. So the emotional difficulties caused by extreme emergency events, these can lead people to ignore or worsen the crises. And we see this around the world already, and throughout history as well. And we see the importance of communication within our communities, which is non-judgmental and non-defensive, and building community dialogue within the forum and wider community. So, and we envisage members of our communities being well resourced with the tools and skills to work within Te Reti o Waitangi framework, and from a place of partnership where Māori sovereignty is a given and respected by tau iwi. And communicate, we get the tools and the skills, and we learn them to communicate and speak and listen without judgment or defensiveness, and hold conversations about emotional impacts so that we can move through these feelings positively and can take thoughtful, effective action. So while we're doing this, also we need to again come back to that self-reflection, and that develop a place of inner peace to engage positively, proactively, and non-reactively with challenges, changes, and tensions that arise. We will also be working in partnership with youth and other groups not already represented in the forum. So how are we going to achieve this? We're on a journey, and we've suggested that initially we create opportunities to use the action learning process to integrate relevant information, skills, tools and actions into our lives and into our work as activists. And also to develop an understanding of our personal emotions. So it's not just a theory, like we can read and we can watch videos, but it's actually really taking the learning action process into our lives. And I will post a diagram of what that looks like. Many of you have probably already seen similar things. So sharing skills and tools and provide spaces for learning about how to share grief, anger and anxiety and find inner peace, and also use conflict resolution to actively work to heal divides. We're looking at to create a variety of opportunities for climate change dialogue in our communities, which involve discussions and the creative arts and other ways of connecting in the awesome ways that humans can have demonstrated through the years. So also to create opportunities in the forum hui for members to know each other better through interactive processes, workshops, sharing of kai and personal connections. So that's just a summary of our strategy. We didn't stick to the word count, but we did have twice as much as what we've presented, so, or 3 times as much. So I really, look forward to seeing some of the feedback that's coming in, and and look forward to the discussion later. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you both so much for your presentations on the strategies that your group have been working on. I'm sure that lots of people here will be keen to feed their ideas into those strategy documents, and the links are in the agenda. But they are not your only choices for a breakout room this evening. There are others. So before we break into breakout rooms, which I'll be organising shortly with you, there are 2 other choices, and one is with Michael Burton, who has produced with the financial admin and finance subgroup a financial strategic plan for the forum. And this is your opportunity to feed into that, feed your ideas and see if you think that this team is on the right lines about how the forum should spend its limited financial resources and how it should go about finding more and what for. And finally, you could choose to enter a breakout room with the wonderful Joanna Santa Barbara about consensus decision making and resolving contentious issues in the forum. Jo, did you want to speak briefly to that?
Yeah, I'll just say one or two things. That in this session we'll be won't use slides, please. In this session we'll be doing a couple of things simultaneously. One is a trial of the consensus decision-making process that has been developed to iron out bugs. And at the same time, we'll be doing a real life proposal to see if the form that's been developed is fit for purpose, and whether the group wishes to approve it or send it back for more work or reject it. So we'll be doing those things simultaneously.
Kia ora, thank you. So I'm going to start with a new technique for putting us into breakout rooms, mostly because I forgot to organise it earlier on. So I'd like you to consider if you would like to be part of discussing the social justice strategic plan. Can you go down to the bottom of your screen and choose, oh, hold on, where's mine gone? Oh no, reactions, there it is. If you're on full screen, you'll see it, reactions, and choose a clap symbol. If you would like to participate in the social justice group chat, then put that clap symbol up on your screen and I'll move you over. If you would like to be part of the peace, conflict and reconciliation discussion, then give yourself a thumbs up. Now, if it goes off your screen, please put it back up again because I need to be quicker about this. So I'm going to do this now, and hopefully, oh bugger, hold on, it's done all this wrong. Let me try again. Oh no. Okay. Oh dear. Okay, I'm not going to do this again. This is not working very well at all. Oh, stuff it. Recreate this. Okay. Now we're where I hoped we would be. Okay, go with the clapping and the thumbs up again, please, everybody. And you should get yourself a thing as soon as I'm ready. Lindsay, I see you. Kendra, I see you. Jace, I see you. Hannah, I see you.
Well done.
Trindy, I see you. Who else have we got with a clap? Jessie, I see you. Anyone else with a clap? Jenny, I see you. Who's on the other screen? Fiona, I see you. This is not too bad, is it?
Doing great.
Julie E, I see you. There we go. That room's sorted with 9 people. Wonderful. Okay, thumbs up, people. I see Robin. I see Aaron. I see Anne. I see Christine. And I see Colin. Yeah, I see you, Aaron. I see Franca. Okay, and I see Verena. Okay, that's a nice 7 people. Okay, so same again. If you are a financial strategy person, then please give me a clap. If you are a contentious issues and consensus process, give me a thumbs up. Okay, so clap for Michael, I see you. Jenny, I see you. Roger, Peter. Any more claps? So that's financial people. Okay, 4 folks. If you're undecided, then maybe you could be a clap as well. Leslie, I see you. And Gillian, I see you. Wonderful, thank you. And thumbs up, people, for contentious issues. That's Karen. I see David. I see Joe. I see Anne. I see Jessica. All right, I'm going to open the rooms and we'll see who we've got left.
Welcome. Isn't this amazing technology? It's wild, but it's amazing. I think because we've only got 9 participants, if you wanted to, in a reasonably quiet environment, you could just unmute as you want, so that you could just come in. I think I'm suggesting that we just go straight to the share document, don't we? And start reading, talking, making comments, making notes. Is there anyone that feels like they could actually take some notes as we go, so that we can either add things in? I think at the moment we can't actually insert comments directly into it. Anyway,
Yep, I can do that, and I think I've got edit access to be able to add notes straight in if you want me to.
Yeah, if you go into the agenda, that you've got the link there.
Yep.
So what I'll do is share the screen, yeah, so we can all see it. Is it just before we do that? Does anybody want to make any comments at all before we kick off? You're all okay? Just to let's just go for it. Here we go. So you can still see each other down the side or across the top, depending on which way you're going. So here we are on our social justice draft strategy. Here's the people that have been involved in developing it. I think some of them are here tonight, not all of them. And let's just have a look at our why, which is pretty crisp. And I think maybe I'll just read it. So, you know, sometimes just hearing it and thinking about it as we go. Social justice is often the forgotten issue in climate change. Linked to fairness and equity, it is essential for a resilient social fabric and environmental well-being. Inequality has a proven correlation with poor social and environmental outcomes. It is widely acknowledged that the poor, who are least implicated in causing it, are least able to adapt to or mitigate against climate change. There are also ethical questions about intergenerational justice when considering climate change. That's our why.
That seems
Comments?
a lot.
We're trying to, I mean, we're looking at big picture stuff where we are and trying to engage with the things that are intrinsically linked to it. Yes, the social is inside the environmental and the economy is in the middle. So we are in this bridging world between any number of forces, and yes, ethical issues arise out of all of these injustices. Any comments? Thanks, Lindsay. Jump in, say a few words, anyone?
I just want to say that the inequality reference, I think, is absolutely critical. Every corner I turn, I see the word inequality in front of me. It doesn't matter whether it's an economics conference or reading a book or an article. So big thumbs up for that.
It's a really challenging one because we know that inequality has just risen and risen and risen. And, you know, we also know that the wealthier people are, the less, there's now significant evidence to suggest that the less, the more material wealth someone has, then the less empathy they have. As they get richer, they get less connected and less understanding, less compassionate, less, you know, and so that in itself is an enormous issue. Goodness knows. When we look at those graphs that Joe and Jack showed us tonight, I mean, it's gravely worrying. So the quicker we can move to more well-being economy, the better.
I don't want to say too much, but can I chip in briefly? I think you've talked a couple of times about bridging, which I think is so important, Kendra. But I see the bridging is going the other way too. There's a message here for the well-off as well as for the not so well-off, and I think we must be part of that process too.
And I think that's our part of our privilege. Yes, it might be material privilege at all sorts of levels, but it's also educational knowledge, skills that we've had the privilege of being able to work in different contexts, grow careers over time possibly, and understood how, and so we do actually understand sort of both ends of the spectrum to some degree. Any other things that you feel like need to be included in here that are not?
I think one thing perhaps, and it's just probably one more word, in terms of the poor are less able to adapt to or mitigate against climate change, they're also often most heavily impacted by it, in that they might be living in areas that are most impacted by sea level rise or the health implications, those kinds of things.
Do you want to just put that in, Jessie? I think that's a really good point and would be really useful to put straight in. Yep.
That's probably not quite the best wording, but
this is also a huge question.
Maybe most likely affected. It isn't necessarily always the case, but yeah. Sorry, someone else? Was that Fiona?
I just said, I guess there's also a
Jenny.
question about who will pay for Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the huge question about who will pay for, the problems that will arise through sea level rise and that sort of thing, particularly in New Zealand,
Oops, you've disappeared from us.
going to be a huge financial impact.
Yeah, nice. Disproportionately.
How are we going to deal with that?
Yes, if the poorer are the most affected in any situation, who comes in to support that change? Yeah, and that response. Maybe we'll just read on, and then there might be other comments that you want to make, and then we see the ways or see the parts that they might actually want to come into. Is that useful? Okay. So this is our what. The transformation that climate change demands is an opportunity to redesign regenerative, ethical and equal communities, enabling a resilient and stable society with improved social and environmental outcomes. In our collective response to climate change, everyone, including children and young people, has access to trustworthy information and decision-making processes. Those who are most vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change are supported. No one is left behind. This is interesting to me because I just saw on Al Jazeera News last night, almost was fascinating. The is it Antonio Guterres? I was pronounce his name perhaps incorrectly. Was saying that the UN, has been writing up some urgent climate change responses, and this is almost what he said. And I kind of went, hang on a minute, he's been reading our chapter. So it's very interesting that this is a global, conversation, which is great. We can all contribute to making the difference. We acknowledge that we are all interconnected and part of the global community. We support each other to live lives we can value in these changing times. Is it too loose? Is it too broad? Is it too aspirational? Not clear enough? What do you think? Julie?
I think it's trying to paint that picture. I was trying to imagine of what a response to climate change would look like without social justice. You could just see that the rich would look after themselves and there wouldn't really be an effective response. So it seemed to be painting kind of a picture of how we can all come together, that's a requirement of an effective response to climate change. It is going to demand everybody coming together in a different way. The interconnectedness and the transformation that's demanded. I think they're huge ideas, but yes, I thought it was a really powerful sort of way of setting out that vision.
I need to disclose that, in my working life, I work for an organisation called Inspiring Communities, and the whole work of Inspiring Communities is based on 5 fundamental principles. And the first one is about growing some sort of shared vision. And as much as, so that's partly why perhaps it's taken something of this sort of flavour. But what I'm curious about is the way in which COVID has actually created massive amounts of collective conversation. And we are actually facing what I think is actually in a way being caused by an aspect of climate change in the first place. It feels like this is the canary in the coal mine. I don't know if other people are feeling the same, but I'm sort of reading COVID as a bit of a canary in the coal mine, and that we have this capacity to work together. And I'm terribly inspired by the way in which the leadership of New Zealand anyway, has created the team of 5 million. We're not all a team and we don't all play together, but about certain issues we can actually at least go with the consensus or go with the majority, and that's the wonder of a good democracy. So it's something to do with trying to create a sense of how we could, as this unfolds, respond to the stuff that's going to be thrown at us. than
It
unmitigated.
was really powerful, wasn't it, to bring everyone together here? Because I've only recently come from Australia, and it seems we didn't quite get the same flavour there. There seemed more fracturing, whereas here it was very much that team of coming together. And it would be amazing if the entire world could come together around climate change, but I guess that's a sort of a taste of the kind of vision that that we'd like.
And that is the challenge, but at the same time, surely as a region, you know, of relative, I don't know what the relative distribution of inequalities are here. I mean, I think they're probably, yeah, I'm not sure, but you know, that's what the vision of this forum. I mean, goodness knows where else in the country this forum is even, you know, being thought of. So, you know, hopefully we're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Kendra.
that's our what? Yes.
Kendra.
Oh, sorry, Lindsay. I'm sorry.
Kendra, I think it's wonderful what's written, and I agree with what's been said. But I do think the idea of who is the most vulnerable needs some exploration, and I don't like to use the word definition, but at least scoping. Because, I mean, where does a farmer sit whose land is being affected? What about the boss of tallies whose fishing might be affected by acidification? I'm not trying to advocate for those people. I'm just meaning it's very easy.
But our words do need to.
Sorry?
Our words do need to reflect them all.
I think so, and I think it's very easy to think that we're just dealing with the people who are in the lower socioeconomic area at the moment, and goodness knows they do need help. But I think there are a lot more people that will come in the firing line of this, and B, I think it's a powerful strategy to open the doors to a lot more people too, in terms of that bridging that we were talking about.
And the other part of that is, and to some degree we couldn't figure out how to say it, is that it may well be that a particular part of our community, especially if we're looking at sea level rise, is that actually it's situational. Ruby Bay was suddenly the most vulnerable in the storm of 2018 or whenever it was, or 17. So, you know, it's like defining the most vulnerable is like, could be situational, depending on how events kind of unfold. So maybe we need a qualifier in there in some way.
Kendra, I think the word poor needs to be revisited because some people can be marginalised for a period.
Yep.
So we can have the most marginalised people.
I don't know if
because
we've
of
used the word.
Something, but because of COVID, but they might not necessarily stay in that position, but they wouldn't want to be known as the poor people per se in community. So I'm not looking at the what, I'm looking at the previous one. And at this what one, when you've got in brackets, including, where did I read, including children and young, I just think we need to include, it's an intergenerational thing that we're looking at, isn't it? And I just wonder if that word needs to be encapsulated somewhere when we're starting to name different groups.
I personally didn't want to put children and young people, but there was certainly a strong sense that, so we've got it down here, is that I mean, I just rather leave it as everyone, but I mean, it's
if you start naming just a couple of references to two different groups, what message is that giving to the wider community? That's my concern for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment, Kendra?
Yes. I'm sorry, I can't see everybody on this thing, so yes, please just jump in.
Yeah, Sean here in Dunedin. I'm just going to comment on the use of the word inequality. In public health literature, they make a distinction between inequality and inequity. And as far as I'm aware, that the inequalities can often be natural differences between people that are a lot harder to address through legislation and regulation. But if the focus is on inequity, if there's breaches of human rights law and that sort of thing, then that's where the focus should be. So I'm just wondering if you've got any comments about the use of terms in the document.
Yeah, I'd much prefer the inequities. I think that is more embracing of the differences. Yeah. Where can you tell me where it is in this? Is it in this section particularly?
I just thought it was just highlighted just there, just 30 seconds ago.
I'll go back up there.
Up in the Y.
Yeah, this, yeah.
Inequality rather than inequity. Thank you. So Jess is onto that one.
Can you put it full page, Kendra? Or does that work?
How do I do that?
Yeah, try.
How do I do that? Does anybody know? I'm not actually sure how to do that.
Try that one that you've got your arrow on just before. Right. No, at the top, at the top right.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh.
You could try zooming out a little bit. It will probably make the text smaller.
Yeah, I'll put it up to 125. Would that be easier? And now I'm lost as to, I need my menu. Sorry about this. I've lost track of where my arrows are. Oh, these we are. Okay, so can you see that all right still?
Yep.
And now we can see the comments as well as they're flowing on. Okay, shall we go on to the next section? Because we can come back. I mean, it's not that long a document. So same here. So here we've got our what, and I think, is it, Jessie, you're just writing some other notes in there.
Yeah, I'm just making a note of what people are saying as we go, so we can make edits.
Okay, so now let's have a quick look at the how. And there was lots and lots and lots of material out of this, and to be honest, it's kind of, has it come down too small? We felt that there was also quite a long conversation about you know, what's achievable in the how zone rather than being too aspirational in here too. So there was a real sense of that we needed to identify, to promote, and then collaborate with existing networks and activities that currently that work on social justice generally, so that we had an understanding of vulnerabilities, but whether that's social justice in the broader sense or whether it is around vulnerability in terms of sea level rise, you know, it's like they in fact could be two different things. So I'm not sure where to go with this. Adapt and develop new initiatives as identified, so that as much as there might be new networks or activities are going on, we might have a sense that we could develop new initiatives to better address some of those issues, that we could make ethical decisions to create more just solutions, and that we be a voice for social justice in the local decision making in business. Thoughts on that? It's really hard to identify the how of social justice within climate change, both of which are enormous scope.
Do you think that we can achieve that social justice if we don't achieve the regenerative and redistributive economy that Joanna talked about? Because if we don't have that redistribution of wealth, then the power still gets concentrated in the hands of the very few.
Yeah, I'd love to see something go in there about that. It's great that this is still a draft and we're still finding ways to include. So it's almost like that the wider context of our how is, or the first thing to be challenging is about the regenerative and redistributive economy. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to chime in on this point right here about the how. First of all, I think that you're saying that it's very broad is true. The how is much, much too broad for us to make bullet points on here, and I think that we should kind of go away from trying to corral the different hows. What we really are talking about is the third one, which says make ethical decisions to create just solutions. So what we really need is a system of making those decisions, and rather than I try to identify the kind of decisions that might be made. The decisions that might be made will be different within this decade and the next decade and the next decade, and for our children's children, there are going to be a myriad of individual and kind of technical issues that we cannot envision now, and we don't want to try to do that. From my perspective, this is where we really should cut back on the idea that we're going to be comprehensive in our decisions and go back to the how we make decisions. How we make ethical decisions is the critical function here. And I believe that we have already identified in our previous social justice work the 6 principles that if you adopt them, you will make ethical decisions and bring social justice into decision making. So from that, I kind of think that we should probably insert the 6 ethical decision making principles that we have already created, rather than try to go for a list of possible initiatives that we will never be comprehensive on, and will they will just be unending and cannot be comprehensive.
Have you got those at hand, Jace, that we could, or that you could put into a comment at the side there?
Well, I can send them over to Jessica, or Jessie, excuse me, and maybe Jessie could manipulate them.
So let's just move on then, and yeah, good points. But it makes me think then, how does this interrelate though with the decision-making forum group, which is, another level of decision-making for the forum itself? Are we going to kind of mirror the same kind of decision-making process on the base assumption that whatever it is, it has to be just and it has to be ethical?
Well, we're not going to prescribe what the forum decisions are going to be, or even envision all of the possible permutations of what will come down. There'll be I don't think we need to envision that. I think we really just need to envision the kind of way that we will make those decisions, rather than what the decisions might be.
No, I'm not suggesting about what the decisions might be. I understood that there was a forum group called Consensus and Decision Making. Just like we've got a social justice group and a peace and reconciliation group. I thought there was a consensus and decision making group as well. So
I think there is too, Kendra.
Yeah, so I'm a bit confused about where our decision making process, if our how is based on a decision making process, then yeah, I'm a little bit confused about.
I believe that the consensus making group is not a actual committee on the forum. I believe it's just something that has come up now as a sort of a project within the Peace and Reconciliation group on how to make decisions.
Okay.
I believe that's the case.
Okay.
Indra, may I chime in here a little bit?
Yes, Lindsay, go for it.
I think Jace has made a really good point. In fact, I gave you a thumbs up, Jace. However, I don't think what you've described is sufficient. I think the how needs more than just making ethical decisions. I think what I didn't get out of things there is a sense of engagement.
Yes.
What are we actually going to do? Okay, we've made a good decision. How are we going to get this across? And I think a thing that came out of Fiona's comment was that I think part of it, to my mind, should be to engage with the other sectors. I call them sectors, whether it's, we talked before about decision making, or whether it's culture or building industry or whatever. And so I think the idea of integration, we can very easily descend into a sort of our own silos again, and that would be a weakness, I think. So those are two things I'd plump for on there, not how we should do things, but the sort of things we should aspire to do, engaging and integrating, and I'd be value seeing those there.
Okay, engaging, integrating.
I had a question kind of related to that. I wasn't sure if it came up here or later, but part of my interest was how this group will interact with the other subgroups. So, because I'm in the resource and waste group, and we were talking the other day about how it's not very good. There's all this cheap stuff that doesn't last. It's better to have stuff that's well made and lasts. But of course, that is more expensive. And so how do you try and deal with these issues in a way that doesn't therefore disadvantage people? And I just wondered if some of the connections would be that when we have dilemmas like that, then talking to the social justice group, you're looking at inequality and how to address some of these issues, that you may be able to support other groups when they're struggling with issues that could come across this kind of topic. It's the interactions between the groups that's the real value. It's not a particular decision, it's more seeing this group as a resource, but being really mindful of those connections as we make a decision. We can't just recommend, hey, everyone needs to buy the best stuff that's going to last forever without taking knowledge of the consequence, or having someone to, look, we really do care, but we don't know how to go with this. So, yeah.
Good one. Yep, nice one. Thank you. So, yes, and thank you. Jessie's going for it. You keep you on as a note taker, that's for sure. Okay, let's go on down. So the next bit is about, and we had quite a bit of discussion about what principles meant, and in the end, I think we went to, what's her name, Julie, to give her some guidance, and her, even though it says the key should and must ideas about your strategy, actually that didn't kind of work for us, and her thing was like, how will our group work together best for the greater forum, social justice activity. So the key principles for the way in which the SJ group will work is about compassion and respect for differing opinions, information, sources and consequences to people, environment of climate change, awareness of the highly dynamic nature of social justice in relation to climate change, which speaks a bit to some of the comments made earlier, that economic considerations are secondary to restoring Māori, and that's about that we're between the worlds of the environment and the economy, and that they're secondary. Fundamental right of all to durable and healthy shelter. This is, coming down to some quite pragmatic human needs as much as the bigger philosophical things. Actively include those made most vulnerable, that's the same thing again, by our current social and economic models, and those whose voices are socially and historically marginalised. And be mindful of the intergenerational implications of climate change. They're big things to hold, aren't they? Sean, go for it.
Yeah, I can chip in. Just the panel above where you're talking about the general and the specific, how, the what, how, and why relates to use of language when you say content, form, and intention. That's one way it's always guided me, anyway. But I was going to say, with reference to that next panel, where you're talking about the fundamental rights, you think of that famous image of Eleanor Roosevelt holding the Universal Declaration in 1948. And I was thinking about that this week, where you're reading about Kate Raworth's Donut Economics. In that book, she talks about how we think in pictures and images. Yes. And that's a famous image. The thing is, the human rights framework and our New Zealand Bill of Rights surely has to be part of the how in the framework. It's a generic thing that applies outside the forum, but it still guides our thinking and conduct, doesn't it? Because it's instrumental as a guide to behaviour. So is that one way, any way of, or do you think it's worth mentioning?
Making it explicit rather than implicit. So do you think it comes under the principles then, Sean, or do you think it's more about the how? No, it's more about...
Well, I think, human rights, the general, and have a specific, they're like a framework that will have specific application, won't they? So you think of all the different articles, so it's close to 30 articles.
Yeah.
But So I think it's more, yeah, it's more general. Maybe it's in that panel above where you've got the cursor right now. Something
Yes.
about, you know, act with reference to the human rights framework or something like that.
Can I just ask if the Sustainable Development Goals came up in your consideration? Because if you start to say right to housing, you then start to say right to productive work.
Yes, I thought that myself, yes. So maybe that's a how-to, yes. There it is. Nice one. Okay. Shall we just move on? We've got about 10 more minutes at the most. So there's a couple more here. So be mindful of the intergenerational implications of climate change and maintain a think global, act local perspective. Respect and understand the injustices of all people and ensure that local action does not create more injustice elsewhere. Gee, they're biggies, aren't they? Okay, so our priorities we decided with three key ones. Develop an understanding of the social justice issues in Nelson Tasman and how they vary across our region. Research how local social justice issues are affected by climate change impacts, mitigation and adaptation, and how this might change in the future. And ensure all local decision makers use a social justice lens, starting with the Climate Forum. So that starts to shift some of our thinking about the priorities for our group. Responses here? Who haven't we heard from yet?
I'll chip in.
Thank you.
I think this is probably one of the hardest sections, and I wouldn't disagree with anything there. I'd quite like to see the commitment to TDT in here somewhere, and I don't know where it would fit.
There is further down.
Oh, okay, yeah. I would probably see that as being one of the priorities, but I guess, yeah, it's really hard to try and narrow down priorities to three.
Yeah.
And perhaps something around education. I don't know if it fits in this section, but if we're doing research and networking and things, trying to ensure that everybody in the forum has quite a good understanding, so it's not just the people who are in the working group, but, you know, trying to bring it back and help everybody to understand it at quite a deep level and think about how they can translate that into justice in their groups and their actions. And one point that came to mind about the last section when we talked about including people, when we think about the, you know, trying to get to equity, some people might need to be given a platform. So I don't know how we describe that, but we might need to try and, you know, elevate some voices, particularly when there's minority representation. Just a few thoughts I was pondering.
Yeah, I mean, we're moving on to, I guess what we came up with was a set of work streams, and then out of that, in a way, we developed the priorities to try to kind of cluster them. And so maybe if we go on to the work streams, because I'm realizing we're running out of time now, is to have a look at the work streams that we chose, and I think there's 4 all up mostly. So I'll just quickly run through. Oops. Have all of you read this yet, or are you actually seeing this for the first time, some of you?
First time.
Yeah. So we decided that one of the work streams was to research local social justice issues, which relates back to the priorities that will be impacted by climate change, build relationships with organisations, networks and individuals working and living in these communities, source the social scientists and academics to aid this work. The second work stream, to develop or adapt a climate change social justice lens for the Climate Forum, councils and other local decision makers. The lens should include how decision makers engage with communities and promote initiatives such as a community-led approach, a community-led development approach. Collaborate with other Climate Forum groups on climate change education to our at-risk communities, minorities and youth. And there was a couple of little points that enable access to climate change curriculum education at all schools with other subgroups, check with local schools are using the new climate change curriculum and identify any barriers, create opportunities for public events with diverse speakers, movies, videos, supporting young people to speak out about injustice and social inequalities. So now when you see the work streams, you can see how we've tried to then kind of crystallise that into some priorities. And then strive to make the forum accessible, safe and welcoming as possible to all, to everyone in the community, identify barriers to diverse participation, work with other subgroups to explore options to include more people, youth, elderly, tangata whenua, minorities, time poor parents. Participation is a social justice issue. Look at options to go to groups in their community, in schools, etc., possibly combined with education, point 3 above. So, yeah, that's, again, we're in terms of even the how, it's like, you know, finding work streams which are doable within the social justice group's capacity.
I would like to remind people that in terms of their concern about the housing quotient in social justice issues, the original report from the social justice group was heavy about and Trinity will remember this, how much time we spent involved with consideration about the equity in housing and the ongoing social cohesion and all the concerns around that as a special function. Housing is a very special issue because it's like air, water, and food and clothing. Is we don't get along without it. And it's unlike many of the other issues in our lives that are less constrained, less important to social justice issues. So we spent a lot of time on that, and we've got clauses in that in our original document that are arguably already approved by the group. But at any rate, believe us that there is a very strong attention given to that issue.
And I think that's a very valid reason for leaving it as a specific one, and especially in this region, given we're the second, least affordable in the country.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that it's fine to stay in. Okay, let's just carry on now because we're running tight now. We identified some challenges, barriers, and solutions. I'll quickly run through them. Challenges and risks. Inequities rise as CC impacts, systemic and institutional racism and unconscious bias, lack of involvement of those most at risk, fragmentation of regional approaches, urban sprawl, reliance on long-term forecasts, impact of climate change on social cohesion and community well-being, limited information or understanding of the risks, increases in vulnerability to adapting and mitigating. And that lack of whole system long-term planning and decision-making especially within councils and stuff.
I would go so far as to say, instead of, can you just go up just a little bit on your screen?
Sure.
The lacking of, where is it? Lack of those most at risk. There's actually no voice of those most at risk. I look at, just screening up and down who's involved for the ones that I do know on this forum, and that voice actually isn't in our forum. So when we say it's a lack of involvement of those most at risk, there's no involvement from them. I don't see that their voice is represented other than through us. And if that's how
advocates for,
yeah, I don't know.
It's a big issue. Yeah.
Can I come in there briefly, because our key principles do say actively include those made most vulnerable. So I agree with Trudy, but I think it is built in another part of the policy of the strategy here, even though it's a difficult thing to make happen.
So does it need to be that bullet point there if we've already got it in our policy?
I don't know. I just thought you were saying there's nothing that identifies their engagement, and I thought I did see it there. I'm not arguing against you. I think you're right.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
And it's not as though we can do huge amounts about it. It's an ongoing issue in all social justice circles that, because they're too busy trying to make a living and trying to keep going. Okay.
The voice of voices.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I think we're pretty much done. We're going to be disappearing any moment.
Promise out.
But some of the solutions were legislative change, significant action from local governments, support of climate emergency declaration, that the Climate Forum expands membership and activity amongst, amplify voices, there we go, expanding connectivity of global and local faith organisations, having some sort of communication.
Kia ora, welcome back everybody. I hope those sessions were a useful period of time for you all. I wonder if I could ask the social justice team to do a quick minute or so of feedback over how that went and what next for you.
Actually, Jessie, given that you were making the notes there, would you like to actually speak to this? Because you've got to probably, just even in that the time that you spent doing that, she did it as we went. She was amazing, Jessie. Maybe give us your feedback there.
Yeah, there was some really, really great and insightful comments that came through. I think huge kudos to the social justice team for putting together such a great document to start from. It makes it a lot easier to, I guess, make suggestions when it's really clear what's been done and where it's come from. So, yeah, some really good feedback around exactly. There was quite a bit of discussion around the how and what should be included in that how section, which I think is a really important thing to delve into. And we probably needed a bit more time. And yeah, also a lot of discussion around how we can engage with vulnerable communities that aren't actually represented in our forum at the moment, and that being probably one of the key challenges that we face and on the social justice side of things. Yeah.
Thank you, Jess. I think you've done a great job of just doing the notes as we've gone along as well. So I think it's given us and thank you to all of the contributions that were made. It's like these fresh eyes and different perspectives and the tussling around about what the priorities, are and need to be. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. It was a really interesting.
Yeah, it was really great. It was really great to have those fresh minds.
Yeah.
And eager wills in that group, and I hope that they will see how sort of central and important this is and continue on with us in the social justice efforts.
Yep.
Thanks, Jay. So I was just about to say the same thing, that hopefully the social justice group will get their upcoming meetings when they consider all that feedback onto the Ning site so that you can all see and join in and be part of what comes next for that group. So thank you all very much. Over to the Peace, Conflict and Reconciliation group. How was your meeting for a minute?
It was really lovely to see new faces as well and people contributing their experiences. Thanks, Christine, for writing them, and they will be transcribed up onto the Ning at some point in the next few days, week. Yeah, again, the dialogue around how do we talk to people who are diverse, or they feel like they're siloed in another realm, whether it's conservatives or people from different cultural backgrounds to our own. And yeah, that was just feeding on what the previous group shared as well. I think it would be great to work with them about that dialogue. How do we do it? How do we go to the some other groups that are already organised out in the community to engage those conversations? National party meetings perhaps, or yeah.
Thank you very much. Really interesting topics, and I can see how interconnected they are. And so one of the things I would urge you all to do, if you're interested in one of the topics, go along to both of them if you have the time and energy, so that we can make those cross connections really clear, and so the groups can work together. Wonderful, thank you. Over to the Financial Strategic Plan group. How did you guys get on?
We had it was a very useful discussion, and it sort of followed on from the meeting of our subgroup last night where we talked about these issues, but it was great to get new and different views on things. But we talked briefly about our approach to financial management, and to have a sort of a statement on the ethics of our operations and how we do things, so that that's very clear to people that fund the organisation how we operate, and engender trust. In terms of funding, of seeking funding proposals, which was a lot of our discussion, we wanted, and the suggestion that I brought in, but which was greatly supported, was to have a questionnaire with the various subgroup coordinators about what projects it is that they envisage their subgroup would want to fund, and bringing those together so that we can prioritise them at a forum level as to the things that are most important to get at, most important things that we need to apply funding for. Another suggestion we had was about making sure that we account not just for the cash that we get, but also provide accounting of contributions in kind, because an organisation such as ours is very heavily reliant on the efforts of people that aren't being paid to do that work. And so including that actually would develop quite a significant case to put to funding bodies that they're adding to something that's already very significant, rather than giving money to a new thing that's sort of just flown up, that we're not just fly-ins. Who we should ask for funding was something that was a topic of conversation as well, but there's a lot of, in terms of the list of people that might potentially fund the things that we're interested in, there's a lot of money coming from the Lotteries Board, gaming, pub charities and that sort of thing. And so we need to develop a policy about where we do, an ethical policy about where we do and don't accept funding from. There's differences of opinion in my own subgroup that are very pragmatic and say that, you know, if the money's there, we should use it for good purposes, and other people that say, no, we don't want to encourage the sort of highly regressive form of taxation, if you like, that gambling is. And therefore, we shouldn't be looking for funding from particularly pokies and gaming. And yeah, there was, I know, some suggestions also about where we can, about some of the fundraising things that we might do. I was quite taken by somebody's suggestion that we could try and organise a concert for the climate, and also whether crowdfunding was something that we could engage in, and whether we could get people to make contributions for particular costs that we have, such as running the Ning and our Zoom costs, our Zoom license costs and that sort of thing, just to take some of the stress off our financial position. But yeah, in that we talked about the process for fundraising, so I'll make sure I put that in the notes and get it up on our Ning site as well.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Lots to think about, and I urge all of the people who are really interested in some aspect of climate change and our climate change response to also think about the functioning of the forum subgroups, and how we work as a forum can be a model for the kind of region that we want to see. Thank you. Over to, last of all, Joanna's group on consensus decision making. For just a last minute or two. We can't hear you.
A very, very helpful group of 6 people with thoughtful suggestions for improving the document, and plans to communicate. Once those suggestions are incorporated, the group will communicate about final approval or not. So I found it a most helpful group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the next steps for your group after that approval will be to bring it to the forum for full consensus, or was your group happy to be a subgroup that approves on our behalf?
The group didn't discuss the latter contingency.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Jo, we've got 10 minutes in our agenda to talk with you about our strategic action plan document and what we want it to look like. I wonder, is that enough time for you, or would you like to have a breakout room at our next TUI with a longer period of time?
I think that the latter is probably preferable, but may I confer with Anne, who was going to join me on this, and whom I can't see at the moment, because Anne had prepared something to say on this, and I wouldn't like to. Anne, what do you think? Do it in a few minutes now, or wait for a breakout room in the October hui?
Okay, well, basically we've had some deliberations in the climate action plan. Okay, now can you hear me? Yeah. We've begun to have some discussions in the climate action plan group, and we decided we'd have a couple of weeks for people to brainstorm ideas for a structure for the document. And what's happened in the meantime is I have put up like a first cut for people to respond to, and that's what I was going to present this evening. But I have now cleaned up my thinking about that, and I will post it on the Ning. So I would say we could probably do it as a at the next hui. And if anyone wants to look at it, the new version of my first cut will be put on the Ning tomorrow morning.
Right. Awesome. Thanks, Anne. And I think that would be a really interesting discussion to delve into for a little bit longer. Thank you. So James, over to you. Would you like to introduce the Flip the Switch program to the room? And then after that, Anne, if you would be willing to share your screen and show everybody how to sign up to Ning and what they see when they have, that would be wonderful. James, are you here? Oh, I don't see you anymore. Okay, we'll leave that for next time too then. In that case, Anne, would you mind taking a couple of minutes just to show us how to get on there and where to find the various bits people might want to find?
Okay, I thought JP was going to do this, but
I know,
I
but
can
he's
do
not
it.
here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see.
While you get set up with that, Michael, there's a couple of comments in the chat about places that you could look for funding if you want to take note of that.
Are you seeing anything?
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing Ning?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so at the moment what you're seeing is the administrators, the way it looks to an administrator. But basically, let me, if you were someone who hadn't joined, what you would be able to see would be this welcome page. And you would also be able to see events and resources. And this welcome page basically has feeds from other parts of the site. So for example, new resources are here and events are here. So this is fed from other parts of the site. And then we've also got an area where important news can be shared and so on. So this is what someone would see if they hadn't joined. Now, if you want to join, what I'll do is sign out. Okay, so there we go. So you've just arrived at this site. And if you want to join, you just click on sign up and you get this screen allowing you to sign up, and it takes you through a process where you have to agree to the terms of service, which include the community guidelines that we've drafted, and so on. People who are already members can invite others. And how much more detail would you like me to go into?
Maybe just show people the groups if that's all right.
Okay, hang on, because I've now got to sign in.
Yeah, sure. What strikes me most about this site is how impressive it looks, our collective activity all in one place. It really looks phenomenal, especially given that the site has only been running for a couple of weeks. So
again,
I urge you
this is
to...
the site administrator view, so just ignore this.
I do urge you to try and get familiar with it, because I think it's going to be a really powerful way for you to get involved in the discussions of all kinds of groups without having to attend 1,000,001 Zoom meetings.
Okay, well, a couple of things that I should mention to help everyone is that we have the Strategic Communications Group has been working together to develop the site. And within that group, we have a bunch of people who are working as what we're calling the site stewards. And those people, for example, if we click on people and we go to view all people, my internet is slow this evening. Okay, so here you see that you can find out who the cluster focus people are, who the group focus people are, and who the site stewards are. So the site stewards are myself, John Paul, and Peter Kemp. And I'm the site steward for the functioning of our forum and Te Mana Te Tau. And John Paul is the steward for the well-being of our people cluster, and Peter is the steward for the resilience of our systems cluster. So we will help the groups as needed in those clusters. So the group hub looks like this. Okay, so there's a tile for each group, and you can click on the cluster to find out which groups are in that cluster. And so on. Again, this is a site administrator's view, so you're seeing this thing here is where we do experiments, so you wouldn't be able to see that. But anyway, so if you go to any one of these groups, they basically have got the same structure internally. Each group has a home page, which tells you a bit about what the group is all about. And then there's a place here where the focus person or anyone else can share group news. You can find out who's in the group by clicking on participants. You can see who is online because there's a little green dot next to their name. So David must be signed in at the moment. You can also see what their role is. For example, if there's a crown next to the person's picture, that's because they're a cluster focused person. If they've got a star, they're a group focused person. And if they've got a little walking guide, that's because they're a site steward. Now, about these groups, anyone can see and read. Anyone who's signed into the forum can read and see the group's content. But if you want to participate in the group, you need to click on Join Us. That will allow you to participate in the discussions. So the discussions look like this. You've got basically a list of what the discussions are. And so if you want to go into any of them, you just click on the title of that particular discussion. And the way discussions work in Ning is that they are threaded. So that means that somebody, whoever started the discussion, puts up something to kick it off. And so if you're the first person to respond, you're going to write something in this box. And then what you write is going to appear down here. So before you write something new, you should read what's already here. And if you want to respond to an individual, to something they've said, you can do that by clicking on reply. So you're responding specifically to this point that was made by this person. If you've got a new point to make that nobody else has talked about, that would be the time to go back up here and make a new post. When you post in this box, you're starting a new thread within that discussion. Now, don't worry if that's a bit much to take in, because you can go to the help area and you can find out things like how discussions work on Ning, how the site works in general, how to manage your group hub, how to add an event or delete it, or a resource, what to do if you have a question that's not answered here, how, etc., etc. And if you've got problems, you can go to feedback and you can tell us what problem you're having, and the site stewards will try to attend to it as soon as we can. Now, one other thing that will be interesting for all of you to know, and this goes back to Julie's point about how you can quickly get an idea of what's going on. One way is to visit groups and see what they're talking about, but you can get a very quick fix on what's going on by clicking on headlines. So this is a feed that just shows you what the latest posts are. So Yakal just posted this event, and Alistair participated in this discussion. And this is just a very brief look at what was said. So if any of this interests you, you can click on it and it'll take you right to the place where that was going on. So this is a feed, and so it works in real time. So as new stuff comes on, other stuff drops off. So you can see there's, unless you want to know more, you can click on more. So there's been a lot of activity already. And at the moment, we have got, I forget what the last count was, but I think we've had about 60 people sign up. 67 participants. So I think I'll stop there. Any questions or comments?
And could you maybe also show how to put up an event?
Would you like to do that? Okay, no, I'll do it. That's okay. So if you want to post an event, I see Arnold is the master of event posting, because he has created an integration with the Google Calendar. So actually, Arnold, could you explain that? I can click to show anything, but could you explain that?
Yeah, so you can just create a normal event, and this event will automatically be posted into the Google Calendar. This link still has to be activated. The whole setup is done. It just needs to be finalized. And so if you're signed in your Google Calendar and you signed up for the Climate Forum calendar, you will see it back in that calendar. And the next thing that we try to do is see get automatically a Zoom link when you put in the location. So if you go with your mouse and to the location position, if the location would be set up to Zoom, I'll try to make it like that we can automatically get a Zoom link created that get published back onto the agenda as well, on the Google Calendar, sorry. But that's the next stage. It's not finalized yet. I have to make sure that's worked properly. But for now, like if you just create an event, so you put in your event name here, just fill in all your details you need, basically your time, your date, a bit of content, what you actually, what the event is about. So it could be either a group meeting or it could be anything. You need to upload a photo as well. That's mandatory at the moment. You have to upload one. I think we're still looking into to have some stock photos to be used if you don't want to upload an own photo. Are you doing one now, Anne? Or? So after you upload your photo, you filled in your details, you can go down. I actually can't see a lot on that screen, but on the bottom, you basically can select what type of event it is. And it's the total forum or a group event or an external event. And I think there's one other, there's a few more in there. But so you basically can select where it actually belongs to go. After you've done that, you can just go a little bit down and you've got the photo now, you've got your text. Oh yeah, here you've got them. So you select here what type of event it is, and you can have a preview on the right hand side. Do you want to create one, Anne, or?
Yeah, I just want to mention something here that we didn't want to put in a category of event for every single group because we've got so many groups.
Yes.
So if you're creating a group event, just choose your cluster. So this, I'll just choose this one. Okay, and you can put a tag if you want to. You can preview what it's going to look like to decide if you want to edit it before you know, just make sure you're happy with it. That opens it in a new window. And if you're happy with it, if you want to work on it, come back, work on it later on, you can save a draft of it. But if you're happy with it, you can save and publish it. Okay, so for example, now if you go on to headlines, sorry that my internet is slow, you will see that Site Stewards just posted a test event. Okay, so we'll get rid of that and I'll go in and delete my event later on. But anyway, that gives you an idea.
Can I just jump in about the categories of the events? One of the categories is whole forum and one of the categories is external. So even if you think that this event that you're letting us know about is suitable for the whole forum, if it's not organized by anyone in the forum, please keep it as an external event. We don't want to accidentally claim that we're creating these wonderful events that actually are being created by someone else. So, but I mean, I'm sure you can see that this is an extraordinary effort by our Comms Tech and Strategic Comms group. They've done a wonderful job, and a huge thank you as well to all of the people from each of the subgroups who've gotten on and have started using it to show everyone who turns up exactly what the potential of this site could be for an accessible, interactive online forum. That's what we're creating here. We're creating a second climate forum almost, and it's remarkable. So thank you all. I really appreciate it, and please keep it up. And on that note, I think it's time to say goodnight and a happy weekend. And just as I started with a poem, I'd like to finish with one that I was lucky enough to be exposed to in the weekend just gone. You may have heard it before. It's called 1,000 Years of Healing. It goes like this. From whence my hope, I cannot say, except it grows in the cells of my skin, in my envelope of mysteries it hums. In this sheath so akin to the surface of the earth it whispers. Beneath the wail and dissonance in the world, hope's song grows, until I know that with this turning, we put a broken age to rest. We who are alive at such a cusp now usher in 1,000 years of healing. Winged ones and four-leggeds, grasses and mountains and each tree, all the swimming creatures, even we, wary two-leggeds, hum and call and create the changing song. We remake all our relations. We convert our minds to the earth. In this turning time, we finally learn to chime and blend, attune our voices, sing the vision of the great magic we move within. We begin the new habit, getting up glad for 1,000 years of healing. Beautiful poem by Susa Silva-Maria. On that note, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And I look forward to seeing you all face to face in a month's time. Blessings on you all. Kia ora.